I mentioned earlier a survey from the Sentencing Advisory Council suggesting a lack of confidence in judges. Two-thirds in the survey believing judges are out of touch with the community. Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is, Chief Justice of Victoria is with me. Chief Justice Marilyn Warren, good morning.
Good morning.
Are you acting governor at the moment too?
No, I was last week and I will be again next week.
Oh, we'll talk to you next week and see if we can bring down the government or something. Are you surprised by this suggestion that people see judges as being out of touch, or is it just confirm what you suspected?
Well, rather than surprised, I am worried by it because I do not think we are. We work very hard to be in touch. At the end of the day, judges, when they finish judging, are very ordinary people, just like you and your listeners. We go home to our families, we go to the supermarket, the football, the golf club, we talk to people, we read the newspapers, we follow the media closely, we all have our football teams, we follow the cricket. We are in touch and we are listening.
Do you go out of your way to be in touch with views on things like sentencing and law and order?
We do. In the Supreme Court, our judges engage in an extraordinary amount of community information occasions, plus we have people come into the court, we speak to schools, we go out to schools. When we sit in the country areas, we never miss the opportunity to meet with the local council. We have local schools come in, we meet with the teachers. We try very hard to engage with the community. We deliver speeches in all sorts of forums, Rotary, all over the place, and we engage in questions and answers.
Do you ever mix with victims, though? The people who've been through the system from the other side?
Yes, we do. We do. It's a very sad thing that we have to do. I have had personal encounters with victims, and I have found it very, very moving and very difficult to deal with.
Did you find them happy with the system, though? Because I don't talk to many who are.
I can't say that they're happy, but their circumstance is affected by what they've been through, and a judge cannot just deal with the views of the victim. A judge has to deal with the whole range of things that are before the court. So it's the victim, it's the accused, it's consistency in sentencing, it's all those sorts of factors. But I would emphasise that judges have very deep compassion for victims, but we have to take a balanced view.
Is the balance equal? Does the victim stand on the same level, or the victim's family in the case of a fatality stand on the same level as the accused? Who? I mean, are they treated equally? Is that the aim?
No, that's part of our system, and in fact, it is very frustrating for victims and their families where they have a sense of being a bystander when they go to court.
So in a sense you're saying that the accused is ahead of the victim?
Well, in one sense, a victim might take that view, but we have a system where a person is innocent until they're proved guilty, and they're not obliged to prove that they're innocent, and there is a prosecutor who must prove the case. And the victims inevitably feel frustrated. They must sometimes feel like screaming in court, but they can't. They have to keep their emotions under control. Victims' families will sit in court and hear the most horrific, graphic evidence, see autopsy photographs, see films of the crime scene, and the way in which they manage to keep their emotions under control is astounding and something for which they are to be respected.
Often those emotions spill out after a sentence. I'm thinking of one particularly the Herald Sun's picked up today. Cameron Lowe's 17, killed last year. The youth who killed him, minimum of 3 to 5 years in the youth detention centre. His mother, it stood out to me, said today this had aggravated their pain. Now, she's already got the pain of losing a son to a violent, ugly act. She believes the sentence has aggravated her pain. What do you say to somebody like that? Does that, and how, as a community, could we understand that taking a life? And I accept that it's not black and white. There's grey in any case and there's grey in sentencing. But when a life is taken, it's very difficult to understand how that could mean 3 to 5 years.
As you would understand, I cannot comment on the individual case. However, it is very, very difficult For judges, they look out in the court and they see the faces of the grieving parents. They also see the faces of the pleading parents seeking mercy from the judge. The judge is the one in the middle who has to find a balance and deliver justice. But in terms of victims, we still do not do enough. They do feel separated, alienated from the process, and hence we do have those occasions where once the sentence is delivered, there's an outpouring of emotion on the steps of the court, and that is usually what is reported in the media without the opportunity for the community to hear the other reasons for the judge concluding what they did.
How do we handle that better?
I think we can look more at the way in which the victims participate in the sentencing process. We now have victim impact statements. There's an opportunity for a victim to read out their statement. I think there might also be an opportunity for judges themselves to reach out to victims. I would like to find a mechanism to have perhaps a debrief system where a judge could sit down and talk directly to the victim as to why they reached the sentence that they did. It's tricky because the judge would have to do it in a way that they cannot be accused of bias by the defence, but I'm sure there is a way we could do this. It's something that I would like to explore and trial with my criminal judge colleagues. I can remember my very first murder trial, and I can still see the face of the mother of the boy who was the victim. I can give you her name. I can tell you the most graphic details about the case. That mother's face and her grief will live with me until I die. But I don't wish to sound unduly emotive about that. What I think would have been good after that case would have been if I could have sat down and talked to her.
Was the accused found guilty?
Yes, he was.
Do you remember the sentence?
He was found guilty of manslaughter, and I can tell you the sentence.
What?
He was sentenced, he was a very young man, and he was sentenced to 6 years jail with a minimum of 4.
And I imagine that the grieving family felt that was unsatisfactory?
I don't know.
Oh, they didn't react that way?
No, they didn't.
And
they were very dignified in court.
You would like to have explained to them why? That's interesting.
Because
you can do that to an extent in your sentencing.
Well, you try to do that, and the family is given a copy of the judge's sentence. We always do that, and they are present in court. But there is a disconnection between us, and you wish to be just, but at the same time you are a compassionate human being and you would like to reach out. I can't help but wonder if we sat down as judges and even just listened to the family after it was over, it might help.
It's interesting. I was attended several times a homicide support group run by the then Victims of Crime Association, and they got along to families grieving, and they got along homicide police who hadn't necessarily handled the cases, and they got along a number of barristers and judges who hadn't handled the cases, and just talking through the process helped those people. Even though they weren't directly relating to their cases, it really helped them to understand. And of course it allowed them an outpouring of some of their passion and a bit of anger. So maybe that has to be formalised. I think you're right. I think it's an excellent idea. You talk about in the Herald Sun today, the media not reporting a lot. Obviously most of the sentences that come down are not contentious. The media focuses on those that are, because that's news, and that's the nature of news. And you talk about how judges get their message out, and that's probably what you're touching on then. How does the public get its message to the judges? Because over the years, it seems sentencing has become, in some areas, in some particular crimes, a bit tougher, and possibly as a result of public outcry as reflected through politicians.
I think there is no doubt that the media have had an impact on sentencing. I said at the beginning of our discussion that judges read the papers, they listen to programs like yours, and it inevitably has an impact on them. As to how the public reach out, at the moment they only have letters to the editor calling into your program and other programs, and letters to the courts. We do receive a lot of correspondence from unhappy people. But at the end of the day in our system, it is the prosecution that puts the case as to how the judge should sentence from the community's point of view. It may be that there should be more communication between the prosecution and the community.
I know you need to get to court. Just finally, I noticed this survey does refer to, I think it's 45.8% of people don't agree that a judge is the best person to choose an appropriate sentence. Is it worth exploring a greater role for juries in perhaps recommending a range of sentence? The judge not necessarily bound by it, but at least it expresses a view from a group of peers who have sat through all the evidence, found a person guilty, and we say we think it's this end or that end of the penalty.
In the United States, in some courts, the jury sit in on what's called the plea hearing, and they'll hear all the submissions and argument as to the sentence that should be imposed by the prosecution and by the defence. It's something that we could experiment with. At the end of the day, it has to be the judge who decides. Somebody has to make the decision. So I think it would be very interesting to have the jury involved on an experimental basis and just to have an indication from the jury or a recommendation to the judge as to the sentence that could be considered.
But I assume you would oppose mandatory sentencing, be it from government or jury. I mean, you would resist that at all costs, I'd assume.
There are very serious problems with mandatory sentencing because for every case that warrants a mandatory sentence, there will always be an exception.
Thank you.